What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you like this video. This is going to be your review for Black Cake Season 1, Episode 4. So, this episode focused a lot more on the present day. We got to see a lot more of what was going on with Benny and what's going on with Byron. But before that, we left off with Covey, a.k.a. Coventina, a.k.a. Eleanor, back in England. And she sees Gibbs, and Gibbs sees her. And there's this whole dramatic moment where he sees her, and he starts walking towards her, and she starts walking towards him. And she's the voiceover is saying, you know, do I want to be seen? Because she talks about how small she continued to get over the months that she had been in London, how she just blended in. And she said, you know, she just felt herself getting smaller and smaller and just not being seen. And she obviously makes a decision that she wants to be seen. So we see that Eleanor has reconnected with Gibbs, and she tells him the story. She leaves some things out. She doesn't tell him about the assault. And we found out later she left some other things out too. But she doesn't tell him about the assault. And you know, she said, you know, I could tell that, you know, he was not telling me everything, just like I wasn't telling him everything, but we were just happy to be back together. You know, he was my one and only, and I was happy to be there. And he did tell her that he tried to date and he tried to move on, but nobody compared. When he went in to kiss her, he was like, can we just take things slow? He was like, no problem. So we see them spending time together and dating and just getting to know the new them, because of course they were no longer those kids on that island. You know, they had both grown and changed and been through some, we know Covey been through some things, right? Well, as they're coming out of the movie theater one day, they run into the girl from the rooming house that Covey and Eleanor knew, that I think Audrey, I think was her name, who was trying to hook her up with the guy that night at the party. And she said, Covey, girl, what you doing here? You supposed to be dead. Like, we heard that you died in that train crash. Well, where's Eleanor? Like, we were worried about both of y'all. Like, where is everybody? And so she, of course, gets tongue-tied. She's shocked, and she runs off. And Gibbs comes after her, and she tells him, she says, listen, I have to go. She said, I have got to get out of here, because I can't take the chance of constantly running into people, because I have stolen this girl's whole identity, you know. And he said, well, I'm gonna come with you. She said, I can't ask you to do that. Like, you have a whole life here. You're an attorney. Like, I can't ask you to give up your life to come with me, because I've screwed up mine. And he says, I'm coming with you. He said, look, you are my one and only. We've finally reconnected. Wherever you go, I'm going. So we see that that's how they ended up in California. And she says, you know, back then it was easier. You know, back then it was a lot easier to get a driver's license, to get a marriage license. It was a lot easier when you didn't have, you know, when you only had a partial name or partial paperwork. You know, we weren't in a digital age, and so people were a lot more lenient on, oh, you don't have a copy of your driver's license. Oh, you need a new one. Okay, here you go. And so they started their new life, and Gibbs became a civil rights attorney in LA. It never really said what Covey ended up doing. I don't know if she was a stay-at-home mom, but we see her pregnant. We see her having both of the kids. And we see them just be happy in this world that they've created, you know, where they were able to recreate. Her father Gibbs changed his name. And so they just created this world for themselves. So from that, we come back to present day, and we see Byron and Benny dealing with that. And Byron was like, but she said she never told the father about the assault. And so Benny was like, well, why wouldn't she tell Dad? You know, and we saw a couple of scenes where Gibbs slipped up a few times and called her Covey by mistake, but that the kids were so caught up in whatever they were doing that it went right over their head. But of course, Covey saw it, and Covey kind of looked at him, and he kind of looked at her, and they were kind of like, oh, shit. We saw where Covey would have these bouts, you know, that she would just get sad about it. And we saw a scene where Gibbs was like, look, it's been years. Let's go back. Like, it's been years. Let's go ahead and let's go back to the island. And she was like, mm-mm. She said, because I still don't know what's going on. And he said, well, somebody else got blamed for what happened to little man. So, I mean, I think we're good. Like, I kind of think we're in the clear. And Cubby was like, yeah, no, I'm not. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go. Sorry, I remember something happened right now. And so, but we saw them go through that. So Benny was saying, listen, I wonder why, Byron was saying, I think Dad would have wanted to know. Why wouldn't she have told Dad about what happened? And Benny was like, I get it. Like, I kind of understand why she didn't say anything. Maybe Dad wouldn't want to know. And so they sort of have an argument over whether Dad should have been told or not told. And then they start talking about, Benny says, listen, Byron, I want to thank you. Let me put a pin in that. Before we get to that, we see a scene with Benny and Byron, and we find out Byron has a girlfriend, and we find out Benny is going to culinary art school, right? That's important for later on. Now, that's a little different from the book, but it's okay. It's okay. I've been writing down stuff that's different from the book. Again, that's a subtle difference. A lot in this episode is different from the book, but I understand why they changed it up. And again, when we finish with the whole series, I'll go through everything that was different and why I think they changed certain things up. But we find out that Byron has a girlfriend that he really feels close to, and Benny is going to culinary art school, and the family is like excited and happy for her and all that good stuff. So Benny and Byron in present day end up having an argument after they hear that last part of the tape, and they get on to the funeral. Benny said, Byron, I just really want to apologize. I want to thank you for doing all of this. Like, you took care of Dad, Dad's funeral by yourself. You took care of Mom. Like, I just really, really want to thank you for that. Like, I really appreciate the fact that you did it. And Byron was like, well, why didn't you come back, Benny? Like, you promised us that you would come back for Dad's funeral. Why didn't you come back? And she was like, well, you wouldn't understand. And he was like, just tell me. Like, tell me why you wouldn't come back. And she was like, you just wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand. So, we see Benny take off. We see Byron go home. The attorney told Byron, give her some time. He said, listen, y'all know where to find me. We'll pick up when y'all are ready. Y'all know the drill. So we see Benny go back home, and we see, I think it was Sean, the white guy that met her at her door, and he was like, listen, we've got an offer for the sculpture that we did together, and it's a lot of money. Like, I think you should consider it. And she was like, I don't know if I would feel comfortable with people seeing that sculpture. And he was like, listen, I think you need to really consider it. Like, it's good money. And so we see him go up to her apartment. You could definitely tell that they were intimate, that they were together at one point in time. We see him go up to her apartment, and they end up sleeping together. At the same time, we see Byron's girlfriend show up at his house. She just got back in town. She's a producer. He met her on the production of a documentary that he did. And so they end up meeting each other. And, he talks to her about everything that's going on with the tapes and everything. And she lets him know that she found out about him not getting the job. And she said, this is clearly a case of discrimination. Like, why aren't you mad? Why aren't you doing anything about it? Like, I think your dad would want you to fight. And he was like, whoa, don't do that. She said, well, your dad was a civil rights attorney. I think your dad he was like, don't do that. He said, don't throw my parents at me as a way to get me to do what you want me to do. He said, at the end of the day, this was still a great job. Yes, I was looked over. I do think I'm more qualified and I should have had the job. But it ain't too many people that look like me that's at the level where I am. And if I don't work for this company, where am I going? There aren't that many jobs in what I do. So, like, don't do that. Don't throw it at me, and don't make me feel bad because I'm not living up to this black standard of what I should and shouldn't do and how I should and shouldn't fight. And he ends up telling her to leave, child. He gets mad about it. So he ends up putting her out. I'm sorry, because I had to think about it I had to write it down when I'm thinking about it, y'all. So then we go back over to Benny's house, And we see her laying down with the white guy. He's asleep, and she's looking over at him, and she has a whole flashback. So we go back to, we see that Benny was in a whole relationship with a woman. And they were happy. They were in love. You could see them laid up in the bed, honey. And it's a Sunday, and she was like, so what we going to do this Sunday? We're going to have another family dinner. And the girlfriend was like, yeah. She said, I can't wait to meet your family. And Benny was like, well, to be honest with you, I ain't really out yet. And I'm not really sure, how my family would handle it. And so she tells Benny, she says, listen, it took me a long time to come out to my family. But I'm not going back in the closet for nobody. Like, I can't be with somebody that I can't be with somebody. Like, I can't be open and be out and be in our full relationship. Like, I can't do that. I can't be happy in that space. And so Benny was like, well, don't worry. I'll tell you. I'll tell him. So the next thing we know, we see Thanksgiving has come around, and she's invited the girlfriend to Thanksgiving dinner. Now, she told her family, she didn't leave them in the blind. She told her family beforehand that she was bringing a girl home and that she was dating a girl. So it wasn't that the family didn't know, but as Thanksgiving dinner progresses, they find out that Benny has dropped out of culinary art school. And baby, they ain't happy about it. And Gibbs is like, okay, I'm not understanding. Like, what? He said, what are you doing now? She said, well, now, I'm a waitress. I'm waitressing. And I'm, and he was like, so, we gave you all the opportunities. We put you in the right schools. You went to college. You dropped out of this school. Then you went to culinary art school. Then you dropped out just for you to be a waitress. And so the girlfriend was like, well, she's studying under one of the best pastry chefs, and it's a great experience for her because she ultimately wants to open up her own cafe. And Benny starts explaining to them the cafe and what it's going to look like and everything. And baby Gibbs wasn't having it. Gibbs was like, okay, Benny, you have been indecisive your whole life. And I really need you to figure it out. Because, at this point, you can't even decide whether you want to date men or women. Like, I need you to figure out what it is that you're trying to do with your life. And so, of course, that turned into a whole argument where Benny goes off on the family about how you've never accepted me. You've never believed in me for who I am. You've never allowed me to be who I am and live in my, you told me that I could be whoever I wanted to be, but you never allowed me to do that. Like, it's always been your expectation of what that was supposed to look like. And so they have a huge argument, and Benny ends up leaving out of Thanksgiving dinner. The girlfriend tries to follow Benny out, and Benny is like, listen, don't worry about it. Like, at this point, I just need to be alone. I don't want to deal with you. I don't want to deal with my family. Listen, I'm going to just figure out a way to make it on my way on my own. Okay? And Benny drives off, leaves the girlfriend standing there, and Benny never went back. She never went back. And we see her have her art displayed at an art exhibit, and that's where she meets the white guy. I believe his name is Sean. That's where she meets the white guy. And he's like a big artist who decides to take her under his wing as a protege. And we see them start to hang out. We actually see them, they start dating, and then we start seeing little subtle things. Like, for example, she had dreads and he wanted her to cut her dreads. He said, I just think it would look more professional. I think you would look better with dreads. It would look cleaner. And so we see her cut her dreads off, and we see them, we see him introducing her to his friends, and we see him really helping her with her career. Like, he really is helping her with her career. So one night they're coming out of the movie theater, and they run into the ex-girlfriend. The ex-girlfriend, she left at left at the Thanksgiving dinner situation. And you could tell that I'm not going to say that they were still liking each other or anything, but you could definitely tell that there was still some tension there, some uneasy. So how you doing? I don't know. How you doing? How's life been going for you? It's been great. How's life been going for you? So they get back to the apartment, and oh boy, it's heated. He was like, I can't believe you just embarrassed me like that. I can't believe you just did that to me. And Benny was like, what are you talking about? She was like, I'm with you. I love you. Like, I was happy to see her. She said I was shocked to see her, but there's nothing there. Like, we haven't talked to each other in 2 years. Like, what are you talking about? And so they get to arguing, and he ends up throwing a glass at Benny's face. And if Benny hadn't ducked, it would have hit her dead in her face. So he storms out. She locks up the apartment. She locks the door, and you can see that she's just like crying and upset. So a couple of days later, he comes by and he apologizes, and he does what all abusers do. He love bombs her, says all the right things. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. How could I be so insecure? How could I do something like that? I can't believe it. I'll never do that to you again. I love you. Right? So of course they make up. She lets him back in, child. So then we see her, I guess it's a couple of days later, a couple of months later, they done made up, they land in the bed, her phone rings, and it's her brother calling her to tell her that her dad died. So of course she's immediately feeling guilty, because she's like, it's been 2 years, I never went back home, I always thought we had time to work it out, and of course he's not here. So she's getting ready to get dressed, and she's getting ready to go to be with her family, and he was like, well, where you going? She was like, I gotta go, my dad just died, I gotta go be with my family. He was like, you're leaving me to be with them? Like, I'm the only family you need. You don't need them. And she was like, bruh, that's my father. Like, what is wrong with you? And he was like, oh, so you're just going to leave me for them? You're going to leave me for them? And she was like, that's my father. So so he grabs her. She tries to pull back, and he ends up punching her in the face. So we find out why she didn't go to her father's funeral, which actually she did go to the father's funeral, but she didn't get out the car because she had a big old black eye, and she was embarrassed. And she was like, I don't, how would I have explained that? How would I have told you all of that, right? So eventually we see her and Benny meet back up. And she apologizes to Benny. She says, I was there. I came to the funeral. She tells Benny what happened. And Benny was like, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you let us know what was going on? And she was like, I was embarrassed. Like, all of these different things. She said, but ultimately, what were you going to do? He was like, I would have came and got you. What you mean what I would have done? I came and got my sister. She was like, yeah, but, I just wasn't in a space for that. I just wasn't in that space. So, and then she says, you were right. I think Dad would have wanted to know. Dad would have wanted to know what happened to Mom. So then we see them getting ready to start listening. We see them listening to the tapes again, right? They done called the lawyer back in there, and they started listening to the tapes again. And we hear about her mom talking about Gibbs being the love of her life and how they would have this life together, even though, it was always this elephant in the room of what she had not told him. She said, but, I said I would keep this to myself. I said I would go to my grave and not tell you guys. Like, am I being selfish by telling you now? But then I realized that I wasn't being selfish. Oh, we see her discover the fact that when Gibbs died and her being, we saw that. That was some good acting. It was a good moment. But she says, but then I decided that I had to let you guys know what happened because I need all 3 of my children to know my story. And she said, yes, you heard me right. You guys have another sibling. And I was like, whoop, it's about to get good now. Now, of course, I read the book, so I knew all of this. Okay. But anyway, with that being said, you guys, that's the episode. Let me know what you guys think. I will talk to y'all later. Peace.